The old woman sat in an armchair by the window, knitting silently. It was 12 o'clock at night, and she hadn't slept a wink all evening. She kept hearing noises from behind the wall, scratching and shuffling around. Just before midnight, she would hear chains dragging metal moans. Then, just as the clock struck 12, there would be a knock, 3 sharp knocks on her door. And every time the old woman heard those knocks, her heart would skip a beat. What could it mean? Who could be out at this hour? Was it someone looking for help, or was it something far more sinister? As the night wore on, the sounds grew louder and more frequent. The scratching and shuffling became more frantic, and the moans more guttural. When the clock chimed midnight again, the old woman jumped at the sound of another set of knocks on her door. With trembling hands, she crept closer to the door and strained to listen. But what she heard made her freeze in her tracks. It wasn't the sound of someone knocking on her door. It was the sound of someone trying to break down her door. She hurried back to her chair, her mind racing. What should she do? Should she hide under her bed or in her closet? Maybe if they couldn't find her, they'd go away. But then she dismissed the thought. No, that wouldn't work. Whoever was out there knew she was home. They wouldn't leave. Suddenly, she had an idea. She quickly got up and went over to the bookshelf. Pulling out a heavy novel, she returned to the chair and began to read aloud. As the sound of hammering grew louder, she continued to read, her voice growing louder with each page she turned. Just as the first board of the door splintered, she was reading at the top of her lungs, her eyes closed, completely immersed in her book. When the door burst open, she continued to read, her voice echoing through the room. A tall, shadowy figure stood in the doorway, his face obscured by the darkness. He looked around the room, his eyes wide with surprise. Then he started to smile. "Ah, so you're here," he said, his voice raspy. "I was wondering if you'd come back." The old woman continued to read, not opening her eyes. She didn't even turn the page, though. She knew exactly where she was and what was happening. All she had to do was play along. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Why did you break down my door? Don't you recognize me?" the man asked. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "It's been so long." "I don't know you," she replied, still keeping her eyes closed. "And I don't want to know you." The man came closer, and the old woman could see his face now. His eyes were dark and sunken, his skin pale and dry. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "But I remember you," he said. "You used to tell me stories when we were young. You were always there for me. You were the only one who understood me." "That was a lifetime ago," the old woman said, finally opening her eyes. "I barely remember anything from before." She stared at the man, trying to place him. She felt a sense of familiarity, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The man took a step closer, and the old woman instinctively took a step back. "I need your help," he whispered. "I need you to listen to me." "What do you want?" she asked cautiously. "I haven't slept in days," the man said. "I need somewhere to rest. Can't you help me?" The old woman hesitated. She wanted to say no, to slam the door in his face and call the police. But something about his sad, pleading eyes made her heart go out to him. She knew that if she said no, he would just move on to the next house, to the next door, and continue to haunt them in their sleep. She couldn't bear the thought of another family having to go through what she had endured, so she nodded slowly. "Come," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Let's talk." The man sank into the chair with a sigh of relief. "Thank you," he whispered. "I appreciate this." The old woman sat down in another chair and leaned forward. "Now tell me, what is it you want?" The man hesitated. "I told you," he said. "I need your help. I can't sleep. I keep having nightmares." "Nightmares," the old woman repeated. She knew exactly what he was talking about. She had experienced the same thing herself. For years, she had been tormented by nightmares of a dark, shadowy figure who would crawl into her bed and whisper terrible things in her ear. Things that sounded like the man sitting in front of her. "I see," she said slowly. "And you think I can help you stop having these nightmares? Please," the man begged. "I need your help." The old woman thought about it for a moment. She knew that she couldn't send him away. He was obviously in need of help, and she had a feeling that he wasn't going to get it anywhere else. So she nodded slowly. "All right," she said, "I'll try to help you." The man's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. "You won't regret this." With that, the old woman got up and went over to the bookshelf. She pulled out a heavy tome and sat down in her chair once more. Opening the book, she began to read. The man listened intently, his eyes fixed on the old woman. As the minutes passed, his eyelids grew heavy and a small smile appeared on his face. Soon, his head was resting against the backrest, and his breathing had slowed to a gentle snore. The old woman continued to read, unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. She read until the first rays of sunlight peeked through the window, then she stopped. She turned to look at the man, but he was gone. She searched the room, but he was nowhere to be found. Had he slipped out unnoticed while she was reading? Or was he hiding somewhere, watching her? She got up and went to the door. As she opened it, she saw the man standing on the other side. He was smiling, and his eyes were filled with a strange light. "Thank you," he whispered. "You helped me." "You're welcome," the old woman replied. But as she looked into the man's eyes, she felt a chill run down her spine. There was something about them that she didn't like. Something about the way he smiled. The man took a step closer, and the old woman instinctively took a step back. "I must go now," she said, trying to hide her fear. "I have things to do." "Wait," the man said, reaching out a hand to grab her arm. "I want to thank you properly." The old woman screamed and pulled away from him. "Get away from me," she cried. "Stay away from me." The man's eyes flashed with anger. "You ungrateful bitch," he snarled. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." "You did nothing for me," the old woman shouted back. "Leave me alone." The man took a step forward, and the old woman stumbled backward. She tripped over something and fell to the floor. As she lay there, looking up at the man, she realized who he was. She remembered the nightmares, the dark, shadowy figure who crawled into her bed and whispered terrible things in her ear. This was the monster from her nightmares, and he had been in her house all along. The man loomed over her, his eyes blazing with rage. "You'll pay for this," he hissed. And with that, he vanished into the shadows. The old woman sat there for a moment, catching her breath. She knew that she wasn't safe. The monster was still out there, and he was angry. But she also knew that she couldn't stay in that house. It was haunted by the past, and she needed to move on. Slowly, she got to her feet and walked out of the house. Behind her, the old house stood silent and empty, its secrets buried deep within its walls. The old woman never looked back. She knew that some doors are best left unopened and some knocks are best left unanswered.